Here is my Ferrari 296. And this is the hybrid battery out of it. And we think the reason why this car don't start is something to do with this.
Matt Armstrong just spent $24,000 on a single part for his wrecked Ferrari 296 GTB. A brand new hybrid battery, installed with one goal: get the car running again. It didn't work. Not one bit. The car sits fully rebuilt, fully wired, completely dead, and the fix that was supposed to solve everything changed absolutely nothing. Because the real lock isn't a part at all. It's buried inside Ferrari's own software, and only Ferrari holds the key. So was this ever really about a broken battery, or is something else keeping this car silent? Let's get into everything happening with this rebuild in today's video. The $24,000 fix that changed nothing. The story starts in Cyprus, with a Ferrari 296 GTB.
After months of trying with the 296, we still can't get it started. This car has been through everything. It originally crashed in Cyprus, and that's where we went to collect it.
That had already lived through the worst day of its life. It had been in a serious crash, hard enough to tear out suspension components, damage the floor, and rip wiring loose throughout the car. For most owners, that's the end of the story. Insurance write-off, a check, and a car that gets parted out or scrapped, quietly disappearing from the roads it once belonged on. For Matt Armstrong, that's the starting line. Armstrong bought the wreck knowing exactly what he was getting into, or at least thinking he did. He's rebuilt disasters before, but a modern hybrid Ferrari is a different animal than anything he'd tackled previously. Underneath the bodywork, the 296 isn't just a V6 supercar. It's a plug-in hybrid, producing a combined 830 horsepower, with a battery and electric motor system woven into almost every part of how the car starts, runs, and protects itself. It's less like fixing an engine, and more like resuscitating a small, extremely paranoid computer network that happens to have wheels bolted to it. The rebuild itself was genuinely impressive, and to be fair to Armstrong, this wasn't some rushed, slap-it-back-together job. His team relocated radiators, fabricated custom mounts, and reworked pipework that had been mangled in the crash. They replaced the deployed airbags. They chased down rare parts, some of them sourced second-hand off places like eBay, just to get the car back to something resembling whole. The local Ferrari dealership in Cyprus had already looked at it once and quoted a figure so high it was described as astronomical, the kind of number that exists mostly to tell you politely to walk away. Armstrong didn't walk away. He just found a cheaper, harder, more public path to the same destination. At some point in that process, he made a decision that would end up mattering a lot more than it seemed to at the time. He fitted a full 296 Challenge kit, the track-only body and aero package Ferrari builds for its one-make racing series. New front bumper, a much larger diffuser, an oversized rear wing. On paper, it was an upgrade, a way to make an already unique rebuild even more distinctive. In practice, it pushed this specific car outside the lane Ferrari is willing to work within, and we'll get to exactly why that matters in a minute. Once the physical rebuild was largely done, the team turned to the part that should have been the easy bit: getting the car to actually start. It wouldn't. No crank, no wake-up sequence, nothing. All the mechanical boxes were ticked, and the car sat there like it was pretending not to notice anyone was in the room. Every warning light that should have gone away after the repair stayed lit, and the ignition sequence simply refused to progress past its earliest stage. The team's working theory pointed straight at the hybrid battery. If the crash had damaged it internally, or if the car's safety systems had locked it down during the impact, That would explain a car that looks finished but acts completely dead. So Armstrong did what a lot of people in his position would do. He spent the money. A brand new hybrid battery, at a cost reported to be somewhere around $23,000 to $24,000.
To the point where I had to order a whole new hybrid battery. Inside here is one Ferrari battery, and if this is the reason why this car won't start...
Went into the car. That's not a part swap. That's close to the price of an entire second-hand family car, spent purely on the hope that this one component was the whole answer. Nothing changed. That's the moment this stopped being a normal rebuild story. Because when a $24,000 part swap doesn't fix a no-start, you're no longer looking at a mechanical fault. You're looking at a car that has decided, somewhere deep in its own logic, that it isn't allowed to run. And only one company on Earth has the keys to argue with that decision. When Ferrari drew the line. Here's where the story stops being about a broken car and starts being about a broken relationship between an owner and a manufacturer. When Armstrong needed help, he did the obvious thing. He called Ferrari's customer service line, hoping for something as simple as guidance on the flashing hazard lights and the stalled ignition sequence. What he got back wasn't a flat no, and it's worth being precise about that, because the honest version of this story is messier and more interesting than a simple villain narrative. Ferrari's actual position is a policy. A car that's been in a serious crash cannot be brought in for factory-level diagnostics until it has been repaired and signed off by a Ferrari-certified body shop. Not a general repair shop, not even a very good independent one. Specifically, their own approved network, following their own inspection procedures. On its face, that's not an unreasonable rule. A car built around a high-voltage battery and structural crash safety systems is genuinely dangerous to get wrong, and Ferrari has an argument that says they're protecting technicians, drivers, and their own brand from cars that look fixed, but aren't actually safe underneath. That's the version of this story where Ferrari isn't the villain of the piece at all, just a manufacturer managing liability the way most manufacturers do, with a process built for a much more mundane kind of accident than this one. But then there's the complication Armstrong created for himself, and it's a big one. By the time he was seeking Ferrari's help, the car had already been fitted with those 296 challenge parts, the track-only kit. That instantly muddies the certification pathway, because the car is no longer in a configuration a road legal inspection process is built to evaluate. As Armstrong himself has put it, the car simply isn't going to pass an inspection built for a road car once it's wearing a race kit. Ferrari, by several accounts, has since responded and indicated a willingness to help, but only on the condition that the car is fully reassembled and complete before they'll even schedule an inspection. Sit with what that actually means for Armstrong. He's being asked to finish an entire rebuild, buttoned up, bodywork on, everything reassembled, without any guarantee that Ferrari's tools will actually solve the no-start once it's done. If they inspect it and don't like what they find, given the extent of the modifications, there's a real chance they flag sections of the work and push for replacements. A single repaired section of wiring loom, deemed insufficient, could mean stripping the entire car back down again before real diagnosis even starts. That's not a repair path. That's a loop. And it's a loop that only gets more expensive the more times you go around it. It doesn't help that this isn't happening in isolation. Around the same time, Ferrari reportedly blocked Armstrong from ordering certain parts he needed for a separate GT3 race car project, further limiting his options and reinforcing the sense that this wasn't just one policy applied evenly. It was a relationship that had already started to sour. Add in the long-standing reputation Ferrari has among some collectors, including public criticism from names like Jay Leno about how demanding ownership can be even for people with no financial constraints at all, And you start to see a pattern that existed long before Armstrong ever bought this particular wreck. So which is it? Is this genuine caution from a manufacturer that doesn't want a half-rebuilt hybrid supercar rolling into a dealership network? Or is it a process that's technically fair on paper, but practically designed to make an independent rebuild as exhausting and expensive as possible, so people stop trying? Ferrari hasn't had to answer that question directly, because their policy lets them avoid answering it at all. And that ambiguity is exactly why this story has refused to die down. What is really stopping the Ferrari? While Ferrari has stayed quiet on the specifics, the automotive community has not. And this is where you have to be a little careful, because a lot of what's floating around the comment sections is theory, not confirmed fact. Nobody outside Ferrari's own engineering team has actually opened this car up with factory-level access and told the world exactly what's wrong. But the theories are worth walking through, because they're built on how hybrid systems generally behave, and they explain why this situation could be so much more layered than replace the battery and move on. One idea that keeps coming up from mechanics who specialize in hybrid exotics is that a battery doesn't have to be physically damaged to appear dead.
Before they tackle anything, they wanted to get the hybrid battery charged, and they found one issue. Remember, this is the original battery back in, because the other Ferraris guy.
Modern hybrid architectures are built with a safety-first instinct. If the system detects a crash event, it can isolate the high-voltage circuit entirely, dropping into a protective service mode that shuts everything down rather than risk a live high-voltage line near a compromised structure. If that's what happened here, then Armstrong's original battery may never have been faulty at all. It may simply have been locked, sitting behind a software gate that a brand new part can't unlock, because the problem was never the hardware in the first place. $24,000 spent solving a problem that didn't need a new battery at all would be a brutal footnote to this whole saga. But it's exactly the kind of thing that happens when the real fault is invisible. A second theory circulating among people who've worked on this generation of hybrid Ferraris involves the thermal system. The batteries in cars like the 296 rely on coolant valves that are electronically, not mechanically controlled. They only open when the car's control software specifically commands them to. If that command never fires, for whatever reason, the car may read the situation as a potential overheating risk and simply refuse to power up as a precaution. Under that theory, the car isn't malfunctioning at all. It's protecting itself from a danger it thinks might exist, using logic nobody outside the factory has ever publicly documented for independent builders to follow. And there's a third, more structural theory that doesn't focus on any single fault at all, but on how these systems are designed from the ground up. The argument goes that Ferrari's hybrid architecture wasn't built with just one checkpoint before a car can start. It was built with several, stacked on top of each other, each requiring its own clearance. Airbag and SRS controller verification, high-voltage isolation checks, cooling system validation, possibly a live authorization step tied to Ferrari's own servers before certain modules will rearm. If that's accurate, then clearing one gate doesn't mean the car starts. It just means you've earned the right to find out what the next gate wants from you. There's a fourth angle worth mentioning too, one that's less about any single failed component and more about paperwork disguised as engineering. Some in the community have pointed out that even a fully cleared, fully functioning car might still need a live authorization ping back to Ferrari's own systems before certain modules will agree to arm themselves. The same way some modern infotainment or driver assist features quietly check in with a manufacturer's servers before they'll fully activate. If that's part of what's happening here, then no amount of correct wiring or clean diagnostics fixes anything on its own. The car would be waiting for a yes from a server that Ferrari controls entirely, on a schedule Ferrari sets. for reasons Ferrari never has to explain to the person who legally owns the vehicle sitting in front of them. None of this is confirmed, and it's important to say that plainly, rather than dress up speculation as fact. All of it is plausible, because it's consistent with how safety-critical hybrid systems are generally engineered across the industry, not just at Ferrari. But that's precisely what makes the situation so uncomfortable to watch play out. Nobody, not Armstrong, not the mechanic speculating in his comment section, not the millions of people rooting for him, actually knows how many layers sit between this car and a running engine. Only Ferrari knows that. And Ferrari isn't required to say. This was never just about a Ferrari. It would be easy to file this away as a rich guy's problem with an expensive toy, and move on with your day. But the reason this story has traveled so far outside car circles is that it's not really about a 296 GTB. It's about a question that's quietly becoming relevant to almost everyone who owns anything complicated. When the thing you bought is run by software, do you actually own it? Or are you just licensing the right to use it, on the manufacturer's terms, for as long as they feel like allowing it? This isn't a new fight. It's been playing out for years in farming, where owners of certain tractors have had to battle in public and in court for the right to run their own diagnostics, rather than wait on an authorized dealer for a repair that could otherwise take an afternoon. It's played out with phones that quietly slow down once a battery ages past warranty. It's played out with printers that flatly refuse third-party ink cartridges no matter how well they actually work. What's changed is that this exact fight has now arrived at the very top of the car industry. In a machine that costs as much as a house, owned by someone with the platform, the resources, and the stubbornness to actually push back and document the entire fight in public, week after week. And Armstrong isn't even new to this particular kind of standoff. This isn't his first runaround with a manufacturer over the right to fix what he owns. He's previously clashed with Bugatti over how repairable their cars actually are, suggesting owners could get creative with 3D printed replacement parts to keep older hypercars running without factory support. Bugatti's own CEO publicly pushed back on that idea.
That is one hell of a sight. Bugatti CEO, the coolest CEO.
Disputing how realistic it really was. Different brand, same underlying argument. Playing out again just months later. Independent builders keep running into the same wall, dressed up in different corporate language, depending on which manufacturer happens to be holding the keys that day. What makes the Ferrari situation land harder than the printer ink version of this argument is the stakes involved. This isn't a company refusing a cheaper cartridge to protect a razor and blades business model. It's a structural, high-voltage system where getting it wrong could genuinely hurt someone standing next to the car. That gives Ferrari a legitimate safety argument that a lot of other right-to-repair fights simply don't have. But it also gives them the perfect cover story, because "we're doing this for safety" is very hard to argue with from the outside, even when it happens to also protect an extremely profitable authorized service business at the exact same time. Both things can be true at once, and Ferrari has no real incentive to clarify which one is actually driving the decision, because the ambiguity itself works in their favor. You can see the same tension play out with electric cars from far more mainstream brands, where owners have run into locked-out charging speeds, disabled features, or diagnostic systems that only an authorized technician can access, all justified in the name of battery safety and long-term reliability. The justification is usually true. It's also usually convenient. A safety rule and a revenue-protecting rule can occupy the exact same line of code, and from the driver's seat, there's no way to tell which one you're actually running into. That's the uncomfortable center of this whole story. Somewhere between "we're managing genuine risk" and "we're protecting our margins," sits a policy that looks completely identical from the outside, no matter which motive is actually behind it. And as more cars, not just supercars but the ones sitting in your own driveway, get built around software gates instead of simple mechanical parts, that same ambiguity is going to keep showing up for ordinary reasons too, whether it's a sensor that locks out after a routine windshield replacement, or a feature that quietly stops working the moment a subscription lapses. The final hurdle: Ferrari holds the key. So where does this actually leave the car sitting in that workshop right now? Armstrong is in a position where the only path forward runs directly through the company that's been the obstacle for the entire journey. He has to finish reassembling a car that, as of the most recent update, has never successfully started, closing it up, bolting the bodywork back on, and presenting it to Ferrari as complete, without knowing in advance whether their tools will actually solve the problem once they finally look at it. And even if this specific certification hurdle clears, there's no guarantee the car simply roars to life the moment Ferrari's diagnostic equipment gets connected. If the layered lockout theory holds any water, clearing the crash inspection checkpoint might just be the first of several gates still waiting behind it. There could be a battery recalibration step that only factory tools can perform. There could be a software authorization tied to a live connection with Ferrari's own servers, something no independent scan tool could replicate even with the exact right hardware sitting on the bench. Nobody watching this story, including, very possibly, Armstrong himself, actually knows how many more steps stand between reassembled and running. What we do know is that this has already stopped being a private repair job. It's become something closer to a live case study, playing out in public over months, about what ownership actually means once a car's real gatekeeper is code rather than steel. Every dealership that has ever quoted an eye-watering, astronomical estimate for a modified or independently rebuilt car has a version of this same policy sitting quietly behind it. Most owners just never had the audience, or the persistence, or frankly the bank balance, to make it visible the way this one has been made visible. There's also a financial clock running quietly underneath all of this that rarely gets mentioned. Every month, this car sits silent, is a month of money tied up in a project with no confirmed end date, on top of a purchase price for a wreck, a full structural rebuild, a challenge kit, and a battery that may or may not have even needed replacing in the first place. Whatever this car is eventually worth once it runs, if it runs, has to be weighed against a number that keeps climbing every single week it doesn't. That's not a detail Ferrari has to factor into their timeline at all. It's Armstrong's problem alone, which is exactly the kind of leverage that makes an owner far more patient with a manufacturer's conditions than they might otherwise choose to be. Armstrong has all three, and that's exactly why Ferrari's silence on the specifics has become almost as interesting to watch as the fault itself. $24,000 didn't fix this car. Ferrari's own certification wall might not fix it either, not without a few more expensive loops first. And even once the inspection clears, nobody actually knows how many more gates are waiting behind it. A recalibration, a server authorization, something nobody's named yet. That's the real story here. Not a battery, not a bumper kit, but the quiet realization that owning a car outright doesn't mean you're allowed to fix it yourself anymore. Armstrong's still in the middle of it, spending, waiting, hoping the next update is the one that finally starts this engine. If you want to see whether it does, subscribe, because we'll be here the second it happens.